All right, it's my task to provide some background information on the world's largest active volcano. Today's talk, the outline is going to talk about the history of the volcano, give you some idea of what we do for monitoring, provide the historical context of the last two well-instrumented eruptions from Mauna Loa in 1975 and 1984, and then go through talking about the current status. Okay, Mauna Loa has erupted 33 times in the historical period, and that's since 1832. Half of the eruptions from Mauna Loa stay in the summit caldera at the top there. Just like Kilauea, those of you who haven't been to the summit of Mauna Loa, it has a caldera. And the caldera is representative of a large magma reservoir. And so when lava evacuates the reservoir, the summit of the volcano collapses. So when you go to Kilauea and you look at that big, huge depression, it's because the lava left or fell down. Okay, so half of the eruptions stay in the summit. About 25% of them go down the northeast drift zone in the direction towards Hilo. About 20% of them go down the southwest drift zone. And then Mauna Loa has an unusual class of vents called radial vents. And these vents form on the north and west flank of the volcano. From below sea level all the way up to the summit is where the vents can form. Now, all the historical eruptions in the past have started with a summit phase. So half of them are only going to stay in the summit. If there's going to be a rift eruption, there's going to be a summit phase first. And then we have to track whether or not the feeder system to an eruption migrates into the rift zones before we can say the rift zones will become involved. Okay? A summit phase first, and then possibly the rift zones will be involved. We have to track the earthquakes to show us that magma is moving into the rift zones. Now, some of the things that we've done in the past to help people prepare for eruptions and emergency managers and the like are making a series of different maps. And these are shown here. Let's start with this map on the left. So we're looking at the average effusion rate for the southwest rift zone. And then we're looking at the historical lava flows shown in gray. And the important thing are the transit times you see here. So in South Kona, it's red. Red should be, hey, look at me, take notice. Look at these travel times. 3 hours, 14 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours. That's from when the vents open up, when they came down into the ocean. So in this segment, because the slopes are steep here, the effusion rate is high, the tendency is for lava flows to get to where people live in a matter of hours. Okay, in contrast, let's look at the Hilo side. The historical flow that arrived down in the center of Hilo town took 280 days. Here, the effusion rate is half, and Hilo has topography that actually helps to inhibit the advance of lava flows. For those of you who live on the island and traverse the saddle area, when you get up in the high central part of the saddle, you notice that the topography is relatively flat. So lava flows rapidly advance away from the rift zone and get into that flat zone. Lava flows have a tendency to slow down and starting to spread out. And and the vents just keep producing more and more lava. The front doesn't care what the vent is doing, it's slowing down. Yet lava comes to that change in the slope and has to go somewhere. So it jumps out and it actually makes secondary and tertiary flows. So that inhibits the ability of one singular flow to go all the way down. It divides and conquers. So if you live in Hilo, you have weeks to months to respond. Big, huge contrast to South Kona. Okay, let's look at this area from about Kealakekua all the way down to Na'alehu. This area has a tendency to have less historical eruptions. The distance from the rift zone to the coastline is much greater than the west side. The effusion rates have suggested that these people that live on these flank of the volcano have days to weeks to respond. On the other side, in the northwest sector, is the domain of the radial vents. As I said, radial vents can go from sea level all the way to the summit. In 1859, represented by this gray lava flow here, started at 11,000 feet, and it made it all the way to the ocean in 8 days. Now imagine if you had the same eruption, and yet it had the distance and elevation, 5,000 feet, and now broke out. So this area is an area that has days to weeks to respond, depending on where the vents break out and how quickly the lava comes out of the ground. Now the other map that's on the left side here is what we call the lava inundation zones. These maps, you can find them on the back wall over there for these communities in Kona. And the idea is that a discrete segment of the rift zone will only inundate a discrete region downslope. So if a flow breaks out high on the southwest rift zone, then the communities out here, let's say Ho'okena, may have to be concerned. Now, if that dike then propagates further down the rift and these vents shut off, Ho'okena folks can breathe a sigh of relief, and possibly somebody else downslope now becomes potentially in harm's way. So these maps are available. They're at the library. You can get them on the web page, and you can look at them. Identify where you live, and look at potentially what segment of the rift zone can impact you. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about monitoring. So this map is just provided to show you that we have lots of instruments on Mauna Loa. And the point here is it's well instrumented and we're watching. Now we're going to do a quick run through the pre-eruptive size to be aware that this volcano is not dead and that we're watching it. But you guys have things that you can do prior to next eruption. And down here we're looking at the counts. So here's this kind of ambient background level that we got used to. And then we had this big spike, and that's when we went out and had the press to tell you, hey, something's happening. And now we've kind of dropped back down, but we haven't dropped back down to the prior levels. We're still a little elevated. And even those levels back here was sufficient enough for us to already be in yellow because it was even higher than what the background was prior to 2015. Now let's look at the seismicity again, and these are looking at larger earthquakes and filtering them, and we're looking at only 2 weeks of activity. This is what it looked like 2 weeks prior to 75. This is what it looked like 2 weeks prior to 1984. This is what it looked like when we had those peak of earthquakes. And this is what it looks like now. So we had 35, 26, 131, okay, caught us our attention, and now we've kind of dropped back down, but we haven't dropped back down to what I would consider levels just prior to that flurry. Now here's another one, and we're looking at slightly larger events. And these events may be associated with magma pressurizing the vessel and getting ready to break out. So here we are, we're looking at 22 events prior to 75, we're looking at 11 events. Just prior to the creek, we had 12 events. In the last 2 weeks, we had 12 events. So those levels to us is that we're keeping track of them, but they aren't quite as high as what was happening in 1975. But you also remember we still have better instruments, right? Okay. Now I'm looking at the earthquake counts. And we're looking at them for the 6 months prior to both of the eruptions. And I put that big pink line to catch your eye because the scale on the left is different. So it's set at 10 events, the line. And you can see here that we have, at present, we're having about, just shy of 10 events a day. 1984, we didn't quite have 10 events a day. In 1974, we were getting pretty close to 10 events a day. Now, the one, seismicity is only one piece of the puzzle. We also have to look at how the ground is changing shape with the influx of magma into the system. So in the old days, we used a laser ranging device. And we would drive up to the summit, and we would set up a mirror, and we'd shoot the laser and calculate the travel time, and that gave us a distance. And the distance that we're using as our benchmark is these 2 points across the summit caldera. 1974, this laser ranging device was new technology. Now we have GPS. Everybody's spoiled. You got one in your pocket on your phone, and you say, hey, take me to Costco or whatever. Helps you navigate. Anyway, we can use laser ranging device, and we could see that there was extension across the caldera. So the 2 points were getting farther apart. And so that says magma's coming into the reservoir. And after that eruption, we had a gradual increase up until the 1984 eruption. And just as the eruption ensued, it spiked as the magma came to the surface. And after 1984, we had a gradual increase, and then the volcano sort of stalled. You see the line kind of goes flat or almost kind of deflects downward. Then we have these red dots here, and that's the initiation of GPS as a monitoring tool for us. And initially, we had to go out campaign style to set up the GPS, which means we'd set it up, and the constellations that we take for granted now, in the old days, were only up, you could only get GPS service for part of a day. And now they have satellites that orbit the whole Earth constantly, and you can get it 24/7, but back then, there was only a few. Anyway, so we got GPS, and we can see in the early 2000s, we had another inflationary event under Mauna Loa. It caught our interest. We did have informational outreach then. And then the volcano went quiet. So that's one option that the volcano can do. It can inflate, and then it can go quiet. So there's a GPS station that we have out in the field. And these are looking at the same changes that I said before. Now we're looking at the changes in deformation relative to the earthquakes. So on the bottom you can see, we see a ramping up of the earthquakes and we see extension of the line. We see a ramping up of the earthquakes and the extension of the line. And now we have earthquakes and we have extension of the line. Now this is taking a myopic view of what's happening right at the summit crater. So the first thing we have is this line across the summit, and we're looking at the last 2 years of changes here. And we had an inflationary event in February of 2021. Al alluded to that. We did see that. We were watching. And then the volcano kind of deflated. Lines went apart, and then it came contracted back in. But now you can see it's a gradual inflationary event. And then we're looking at this green dot here, and we're looking at its elevation. The elevation was relatively flat, and now it's climbing up. All indications of influx of magma into the volcano. The other tools we have are GPS. Each one of these basically shows an individual station. So at the base of the arrow is a GPS station, and the arrow is showing the direction it's moving, and the magnitude is the length of the arrow. This kind of radial pattern here is consistent with influx of magma into the magma reservoir. Now to kind of put this in perspective, I'm going to show you some GPS vectors from Kilauea. Okay? So kind of giving you an idea of the kinds of magnitude of motion that's possible in the volcanoes. And we're just saying, we are watching. Okay, the other things we have available to us is using satellite technology. And satellite technology on several passes can look at elevation changes in the ground. And each one of these color bands that you see is a fringe. And so we've had about 6 centimeters of uplift on the summit of the volcano. 6 centimeters of uplift. About that much. And this pattern here tells us something about the geometry of the molten material underground and what's inflating. So instead of it being a balloon, which would be a bullseye pattern, it's actually more like a blade. And this is pretty common for all eruptions. It's fed like a blade-like feature. So it's long, it's tall, and not so wide. That's what's inflating under the ground. Okay, to recap. GPS is showing inflation of the volcano, is showing extension across the volcano. The tilt meter is showing inflationary tilt, and the number of earthquakes are still higher than they've been what we call background. So what are we doing? What's happening there? So I'm going to recap it again. We have small inflation at the summit in the upper southwest rift zone. We have above background seismicity. And what are we missing? We need to have more consistent earthquakes. Instead of them going up and down, we expect them to just gradually go up and up and up and up. Same thing with those deformation lines. We want them to go up and up and up. And if they go up at faster rates, then it might be that guy's job over there to decide if we're going to change the color over here. So what are we doing? Well, we're upgrading our networks, we're upgrading our sensors, we're adding additional coverage, we're talking to our emergency response partners. We are planning, doing internal planning. We're trying to coordinate with how we're going to interact with each other. We're giving briefings, and we're holding outreach to let the public know the volcano is acting up. So, what can you do? You should be aware of the hazards. You have to stay informed. Messages. We're on the job, working. We're watching. Eruption is not imminent. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank, and again, it's always informative presentations that they provide. So as we do with everything, we rely on subject matter experts for all our information. So for volcanoes, it's Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. Weather, hurricanes, Pacific Tsunami Warning Center for tsunamis, and so forth. So as you can see, we rely on them for all information. We try to track as much as we know, but we rely on them. And so how does that relate to you? And how does that relate to civil defense? So I think Ken initially talked about the alert levels. So green being normal, background levels. Right now we're in advisory, so things are a little bit escalated. And we are following our protocols as far as community outreach to make sure you folks are prepared. We meet with the county, our state and federal partners to make sure they are being prepared as well. That's a protocol under advisory. We get to orange, that's when we start taking action. And that's why we've been meeting with the different communities. Initially starting with Ocean View, Hawaiian Ocean View Estates, in those areas because there's portions of that community that are in Zone 1 where fissures and vents will open up. You guys, just like the rest of Ocean View in Zone 2, is, like Frank says, hours possibly from inundation if Mauna Loa erupt and send flows into this area. So we need to get ready. So those are the alerts that we deal with. We message that out to you guys. What can you do? What you need to do? So on the back wall we have posted in several areas. Highlighted by blue coloring are the methods that we get messaging out to you. This is also posted on the county's website, Civil Defense page. You sign up for our Everbridge alerts. Police has Nixle alerts. In this kind of situation, both systems will be pushing out messages. On our system, you can sign up for the kind of incident that you want to be warned about, whether it's weather, ice surf, earthquakes, in this case, volcano. You can specify volcano. You can specify the way you want to get the message. You want text, email, a phone call. So please sign up that way. Don't sign up for everything because it'll get to the point where you're calling us and asking us to take you off. So part of our communication to you today, like we do every June to November, right? We get ready for hurricane season. So with a volcano, same situation. Have your plan. In this case, if lava is headed your way, you need to evacuate. We'll message that the evacuation, is voluntary or mandatory, and we'll support that with the county departments that are represented here. So in that case, you need your plans. Different from hurricanes, some people will shelter in place. So you prepare that way. But in the case of a lava flow, you will have to evacuate. So where are you going to go? You need that plan. Do you have friends, family that you have made arrangements that you can go to? Do you have resources that you can go stay in a hotel or travel off island or even back to the mainland? If those aren't available to you, that's when the county, we will open shelters immediately upon declaring an evacuation. So we'll open up shelters, we'll support you that way. All our shelters are pet friendly. And so you need that plan, you need that communication as well with your family as to what you're going to do. How can you communicate with everybody, each other? Recognizing that cell phones in that kind of situation are probably going to be spotty because of the amount of people that are going to be on using their cell phones. So we urge you, send out this knowledge that if you're not in harm's way, if you don't need to use the cell phone, stay off of it. Let the people that need to use it. And texting is your best method on the cell phone as well. So make sure you have all those plans in place. Also, if you need to evacuate, what is your primary, what is the important things that you need to take? It depends on you. A lot of people, have to have their documents. It'll make it easier. Worst case scenario, that your residence is covered by lava. Having your insurance papers, financial papers, documentation, and so forth, will help you recover a lot faster. So as I said, you have your actions, the county has its actions as well. So all the officials you see in this cafeteria will be supporting the operation. And I like them to come to our events because that's the people that you're going to see running operations, running the roadblocks, helping with the shelters. So from HPD, we have Captain Delaries. HFD, Hawaii Fire Department, Chief Moeller here. We have Michelle Hiraishi from Parks and Recreation. Some other partners we also have is Vibrant Hawaii. They are putting together hubs around the island. They'll support us beyond what the government can do. AIMA is also represented here with Adam Weintraub. And also put in a plug for the community emergency response teams that have helped us during all of these community events. They helped us in 2018 during that eruption. And just recognizing that the community has a place in supporting any kind of response that we have. So with that, all these people I mentioned, as well as myself and the HVO staff, we will be here for questions and answers. What I ask is, if you have a question, come up to the mic if you can. If not, we'll get this wireless mic to you to answer your questions. And then after the question and answer period, we'll stick around as well to answer the questions. So with that, we'll get started. Is there any questions from the audience?
Please come up to the mic if you can. It's right here.
The gentleman said that there was always a summit. You said that there is always a summit event always before each eruption, and there have been quite a few eruptions. So what is the average length of that summit event?
Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, the question was, I always eruptions stay in the summit. So it will be in the summit, stay in the summit. And then the other half goes down one of the rift zones or radial vent. The longest proposed time between a summit phase and a rift zone phase was 1 week. So within the week, if we're going to use the historical data as a guide, you should know whether or not the rift zones are going to be involved. But how we're going to know is we're going to track the earthquakes and see if they migrate from the summit to the rift zones.
Was it the Parks and Recreation Department that closed the hiking trails? There's hiking trails in the park that go up and around the summit of Mauna Loa.
Right, so Hawaii Volcanoes National Park closed their summit trails.
Close those. Is there a person from that here?
No.
Okay. I was just wondering, what I wanted to know was what criteria they're going to use to open them. Because I'm a hiker and I like to do that. I'm in a group that does that. First of all, we're curious why we can't. If anybody's going to know what's going on, it's going to be people hiking around the rim. And secondly, it looks like there'll be enough warning that would not slip past our view that we should get out of there.
Yeah, that's not true. It could be less than an hour between when our seismometers pick something up and when the lava hits the surface. And the Park Service, because it takes hours to days to get up to the summit, depending on which trails you choose, I know that their thinking is that they were afraid that they may not be able to evacuate people in time, so that people would be put at risk if they're in that area, hard to retrieve. And the summit eruptions, while not as explosive as Kilauea summit eruptions, do tend to throw out blocks that are the size of people's heads for as much as a quarter to a half a mile away. So people, they can be substantially dangerous to people that are up in that region. So I think it's just the overall hazard and the uncertainty and the inability to help people if they were stranded in that area made them decide to close it.
Well, I've been up there a number of times. We can get down in 2 hours about what it takes. And it is intrinsically dangerous no matter what's going on up there.
It's more dangerous when blocks of rock are flying in the air, though. So, and they have a responsibility of public safety. It always comes down to what our personal risk is versus the Park Service has to manage the overall risk of the park and public safety considerations.
Any idea what the event would be that would make them remove the warning?
At this point, no, I couldn't tell you right now.
Yeah, I mean, these things are easy to put on, but they're kind of hard to take off because of implied liability. You tell somebody it's safe, and it turns out it's not.
Yeah, I hesitate to speak on the Park Service behalf.
Okay. Thank you.
Aloha. My question is for Ken or for Frank. And it's a gas question. With the Lower East Rift Zone eruption, that seemed to be an especially gassy eruption where there's a lot of SO2 coming out. And a lot of that wrapped around to this part of the island. And we were really locked in with some bad fog. Are eruptions at Mauna Loa considered especially gassy? And you've talked about earthquake and lava safety and steps we can do to protect ourselves from that. But what should we be aware of gas issues? And do we need to be concerned about even more fog, more so than a Lower East Rift Zone eruption here?
Okay, so one of the things is that we have an inversion layer above the volcanoes. So if it's in the summit, the eruption plume can penetrate up into the inversion layer, and the tendency is to blow the gas to the east. Okay, it seems contrary to the direction of the trades. it's below the inversion layer, and the trade wind regime will take over, guess what? Kona all the way out to Oahu in 1984 had fallen. So you guys are not going to be out of the woods. So the same precautions that we've been talking about all during the Pu'u'o event, all those things pertain to a Mauna Loa event as well. Oh, okay.
Aloha. I want to know if there's any plan in place for our children in school. If it erupts while they are in school, we haven't had any plan from the school at all. This is the school. And the second part of that question is, do we have a plan for traffic of us getting out of this area if it's going to come?
Right, thank you for the question. So as far as DOE, we have been meeting with DOE, and that information will get migrated down to each individual schools. We are working with, of course, mass transit for busing, and yes, consideration for the kids in the schools are being made for different school areas. As far as traffic plans, that's why, police are here, fire is here, public works, but they're not here. But, all the county agencies, state highways, we have been working with them as far as what needs to be done. We come up with our plans, and it's all based upon what HVO tells us, where the lava is flowing, what areas. That's why these flow maps are so critical. We don't want to evacuate communities unnecessarily, only the ones that are threatened. So we will get those folks out, we head them in the right direction. And like I said, your plans need to come into place. You need to be ready to evacuate. You need to be aware of where you're going. We'll tell you what direction you need to go. But whether you go into friends, families, some other accommodations, or if you need to use the county shelters. Bill, are we running that system? Find your ears.
Yeah, the Wi-Fi in here isn't exactly working properly, so not today. Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm concerned about our radio and TV system. Many years ago, like maybe 20, I bought one of those all-hazard radio things. The only repeater on this side is up in Kona, and it does not reach to Captain Cook. So the radio you get no information off the radios at all because we don't have repeaters coming down the coastline. What are we going to do about that? You tell us to turn on the radios. We may get nothing because we've got huge pukas, like from Kona all the way down to Kalu is a puka for our radio systems. The all-weather, all-hazard does not work for us. What are you doing about that?
So just clarifying, you do not get the NOAA station in your area?
No, because there's a ridge running between us and Kailua. And in 20 years, as far as I know, nobody's bothered to put in a repeater to get over the ridge. So we're in a dead zone. So how are you going to alert us by radio and or TV if the only thing we've got is coming in to Kailua from Honolulu?
So you mentioned TV.
I don't know about TV. I know about the radio.
Right, so there are some public stations that reach into this area, aren't there?
Yes.
Yes, so they will carry our message. And we're working with one of the stations to enhance their systems by putting a transmitter on our land mobile radio sites to be able to push into Kailua. So that's ongoing.
For TV?
No, that's for radio, public radio.
Okay, we'll see.
Hello. Also, I live out in Ocean View, and there are times that when the electric goes out, everything shuts down. So TV, radio, or whatever, cell phones don't work. And out in Ocean View, there's a lot of people that live out there now, and it's a kind of a big concern for the community. Remember last week you folks were out there, and it was voicing about the Onouli Rd to make like an evacuation, but I guess the volcano has to somehow they close the gates so for the evacuation. But it's like we all talk about that among family and friends out there, that if we do have an emergency where things shut down, we're kind of left in the dark.
Yeah, I appreciate your concern. Also, with police, fire, public works, and this is all examples we had to do in 2018. Even my staff, civil defense, we go door to door. If need be, we recognize that situation, hours out, and in an evacuation also, we'll move everybody out, but we'll go door to door to make sure people are gone or out and evacuated. So that's the worst case scenario. We will be on the ground, making sure people are safe.
Talmadge, maybe a good opportunity to explain that there's more ways to get the information than just the radio.
Just to emphasize the more ways to. So again, back to all those ways you can get the information, the way we'll be pushing them out. The national systems, our county system, as well as the way you receive it. Also, I'll put this plug into, you can go to the Civil Defense page on the county website for all the information you need to be able to build your family, your Ohana plans. Also to get the updated information that was shared with you guys today. Also the scientific research that has gone on by Frank and by Ken. All that stuff is posted. Give you background information.
In Ocean View, we only have a siren right by highway. We live way down in rangeros. We don't hear that siren. Is there any plans that they will do another siren close to life? Or
there's no plans for another siren in ranchos, but like you mentioned, there's all these other systems to get the messaging. Also, while we're talking, we like to take this time to make sure that people are within their community, getting to know their neighbors, getting to know who's vulnerable in your community. Because if something happens, if all that fails, you're still waiting for the authorities to come into your community. You need to be able to feel comfortable to share information with your neighbors and so forth. Check on who might need help. That might come into play. If we get into a situation where we're evacuated, when we set up the disaster information center, when you're registering, we ask, who do you know in your community? Who might still be out there? Who do you have to go look for? And so forth. So, you might not hear a siren, but there's other ways to get that information. If you carry a cell phone, it should come across that way.
because my cell phone is in airplane mode, and so I don't get the messaging things. Then I only hear a siren either. So that's my
personally, we all have our different habits and the way we run things, but you got to be aware of what's your situation around you. So if our alerts are telling you that something's going on with Mauna Loa, maybe you need to change that habit during that period that things are escalating. Or talk to your neighbors, you know. I don't know. Don't come wake you up. I know. I'll let you do that.
You know, if something's gonna happen and a lot of people are like, oh, we don't have cell phone, we don't have anything up. Look up in the sky and you see this big red thing and you see the glow, it might be time to go. Onouli will act as a major lava diversion structure and chunk lava around it. Where do you live?
Nothing has been discussed as far as adding additional roads or opening up additional roads for that area. So we got a plan with what we have.
Just curious, is it anybody talking other ranchers about the safer zone? Is there a way that we can start implementing moving our cattle and horses that way? Or in that problem area? I mean, I remember the last club voted it off. Fellowship.
All right, the questions about the livestock. It was mentioned that in 2018, a lot of cattle had to be moved, a lot of animals had to be rescued. Unfortunately, a lot of animals were lost as well. But we are in discussion with Humane Society. Police Department takes care of some aspect of domestic animals, and then we'll get USDA involved. But you know, I was thinking that Cattlemen's Association, everybody needs to be talking about what they're going to do. Like I said, you know, are you going to yourself, or are you going to go to the shelter or friends and family's house? You're going to be thinking about your animals as well. In particular, what are you going to do with your animals? A situation where you're at work or you're away, your animals at home, how are you going to deal with that? Government does provide some rescue, but you know, we prefer that you kind of have that plan in place as well. As this develops, we will have a bit more information as far as moving livestock, but we would hope that you guys can take care of that yourselves.
So I remember when you tracked my meditation and stuff, and I just put your maps and everything, and I'm reading them, and I'm drawing them on the map, and even if I find something coming out, it's not so it's really not very easy to try to figure out the right path, so that it doesn't work. I find that's something wrong, so I'm sort of lost.
After we're done here, you can come see me and I'll walk you through it. Okay?
But it's just not for me, it's for anybody who goes and starts looking. I think it's not user friendly at all.
Okay, well, when you talk to me, we'll have some discussion about how you think it could be improved. All right.
Quick question. Can you please define radio event?
Okay, so,
Another question.
all right. So, typical Hawaiian volcanoes have a summit caldera and two rift zones. A Possibly some have 3, but these are well-defined areas in which lava will come to the surface and flow away from the vents in there. Mauna Loa is unique in that it has vents. So imagine the caldera is like the hub of a bicycle wheel and radiating out as spokes from the summit. In the north and west sides are vents that form from below sea level to the summit. So it only happens on the north and west side of the volcano. On the Kilauea side, there are no radial vents. So all I can tell you is empirical. We've been able to map them. But the vents are the expression of where lava has come to the surface. So from the main magma reservoir, if the lava goes into the rift zone, there's a feeder system that takes it down the rift zone. Same thing for the radial vents. Away from the summit, there is a feeder system that comes, and when it breaks the surface, that's what we map as a radial vent.
Very clear. Okay, second part of the question is, you mentioned when the lava, if it starts to flow down, is there any opportunity for lava to flow out of an area above that again, or is it just a continuous downward movement of lava off of the water? Did you understand my question?
Are you talking about a lava flow or a vent?
Lava flow. Fission.
Okay, so if you had a fissure system like in 1950, it broke out at high elevation, 11,000 feet, and went to 10,000, and then 9 and 8. So they typically go down slow. So lava flows themselves will just follow topography. So they'll just go down slow, depending on where the fissure erupts. I don't know if I answered your question. Will the fissure system jump back up to a higher elevation and renew activity? We don't. There's an extraneous case in which lava has erupted above, but it was so late in the eruption that it didn't really produce a flow. It was just bubbling within the vent.
So to address that other gentleman's question, we don't have an operational today, but on the Civil Defense webpage, there's a product called Find Your Inundation Zone. So you can plug in your TMP, your address, and it'll tell you on the flow maps where you're at. Go ahead and use that product.
So how do you visit that site? Maybe give us the URL or something for them? I've gone to your website, I've been totally confused, I've gone all over my mind. So it's nice that it's there, but how do I get to that? I guess it's the question.
So just real quick, you go to the County of Hawaii website. Then on the County of Hawaii website is all the departments. You have the Civil Defense Department. On the main page of Civil Defense are 4 icons. And the second one is about lava. Press on that one, and it'll take you into all the information you need to know about lava, including the finder is.
I know that it's likely to happen, but what's the evacuation plan for Konawaena Community Hospital?
So we just got into contact with the hospitals, and they have plans that they support each other. So whether it's transfer patients to other hospitals here, but this island is maxed out already, a lot of their facilities. So the other option is to get them off island.
It's what's this, huh?
So you guys have those data sheets as if your graphs from previous eruptions. Can you guys project if it will happen in 2 months or next year? to continue, or is it completely unpredictable?
When we're looking at something like a volcano, okay, what happens is you've got a couple things driving an eruption. The first one is incoming magma that stretches the overlying rock. Okay, we don't know exactly what volume of space is available for that magma, and we don't know exactly what the strength of the overlying rock is in the region. So we can't get to that tipping or failure point. So all we can see is almost every volcano that erupts, you'll see the earthquakes and the deformation go up, it kind of relax, and they kind of build up like this. But no one's been able to figure out a way to really predict when an eruption is going to occur. All we know is when they're more likely to. And so that's why we're here, is we're in a period where we have seen accelerating deformation. It's backed off now some from what it was at the end of September, right? But we're still in a place where this kind of stuff can accelerate out of. So we know it's more likely in these times for an eruption to happen, but we can't predict exactly when an eruption will happen, unfortunately.
So that pretty much accounts for the way our posture to be ready just in case it goes to that week of eruption. All right, any more questions? Maybe we can take a few more, otherwise we'll shut it down. As I said, we'll be around the area. If you guys want to talk, look at the different products that we have posted. Thank you guys for coming and all the good questions.